Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us from. My name is Abhijit Bhadri. I'm a talent advisor and I work with organizations about their talent strategies, especially in the world that is getting shaped by artificial intelligence. And I also love writing. And I have today a guest who has a rather interesting background. He's a person who's responsible for starting Times Bank in India, and of course, subsequently also worked with the Fortis Religare. It turned out to be a great initiative. The Fortis hospitals, as well as the investment arm, which was Religare, and of course, he was the chief strategy officer for Hexaware. So that's not why we are going to talk to him today. We are actually here to talk to Manab Sen, my guest today, because he's written a fantastic book which I read, which is called, well, you know what? Let's invite Manab to come and talk about this.
Thank you, Abhijit. Such a pleasure to be here.
So, Manab,
So,
I want to start by saying that how much I enjoyed reading your book, The Eternal Scale. And my take on that was it's a fantastic story woven through two particular things which I liked. One is it sort of uses the music scale as a sort of a metaphor that links multiple characters. So, in some sense, without giving away too much of it, I don't want to be the spoiler in this whole process. But yeah, it's a fabulous story which is done through that. And also, a lot of places that you've woven in from different places in Rajasthan, which is where the book begins, to all over and until it rests in US, which I thought was a strange coincidence that your career also sort of was divided between two of the places. It started in Rajasthan. Was that in Balotra, which is the place which where the book is set? So I was absolutely
absolutely,
intrigued by that. What was
absolutely.
it
I was
like? Tell
there.
me
I
about
was,
that.
well, I grew up in Bombay. My schooling was in Bombay, and uh, my sensibilities or, my kind of orientation was very urban. And then I joined that time, the State Bank. Emergency was around the corner, and so we were shunted out to rural areas. So I was literally paradropped from South Bombay to a small little town in western Rajasthan, very coarse, very violent. And the story actually starts over there because, every fiction or every writing has a personal element in it, which is undoubtedly true for every writer, I think. And so it finds itself into the writing. And while I hated being there, every moment of it, when I came out, I kind of figured that it had taught me a lot about humans and human relationships in a different context from what I was used to. And that opened my um, eyes to, being very curious about humans. So I traveled, which the book also traverses to many places. And that's why the book actually is multi-generational and over a fair amount of time, because it begins in 1974 and goes all the way up to 2022. And um, the book really, as it was called, The Eternal Scale, Ragas Never Die, a woman's impassioned journey, really starts on a dried riverbed in this violent town, and an unlikely relationship or love develops between two individuals who are basically in the grip of, they very they are kind of lost, each in its own way. Uh, Ali, who is a cleric, really a Muslim cleric in Balotra, is a victim of the genocide in East Pakistan at that point of time, and he's in Balotra, and he's extremely depressed. And then there's Payal, who was married off very early to a 70-year-old impotent husband and is also extremely depressed. And so they find each other on the wings of music, which and this idea really came up because I did meet a cleric in Balotra in the mosque out there who was from Bangladesh, and because we connected, because I spoke Bangla and he did too, and he played the flute exceedingly well. And although a cleric is not supposed to play the flute, but he used to come over to my place and play. And then I used to see these young girls in Balotra married to very old people and, kind of robotic in their life. So that's when, the idea germinated that if someone were to step outside the bounds of societal constructs, what would happen?
Yeah, that's what I actually thought was, as you talk about your time in Balotra and you're meeting all these people, I kind of think that
Yeah,
in many cases, when I've spoken to writers, they always say that real life actually becomes the inspiration from which your creativity springs. And then you kind of add different characters, you create composites. Is that how you created your characters also? Because, women play a very central role in the book, The Eternal Scale. But I wanted to first show the cover to my viewers. Show us the cover, Manab. I
yeah,
thought that
sure.
was
Here
really
it is.
nicely done. Yeah, The Eternal Scale, Manab Sen. What does it feel like when you see your book in a bookshop? Talk to me about that feeling. You're going to
Oh, it's
launch it
like,
very soon, but
yeah,
what does that feel like when you see your book out there?
it's very heartwarming, and you know, you poured in so much of time and energy into this, and you see it in actual, so to say, nearly flesh and blood. It it's it's a great experience, and you've had this too because you're such a good writer yourself, and you know, it's like your baby coming to earth, sort of
Yeah, it
feeling.
is. It's actually the very first time when you see your book in print, bound and ready, is a moment which I don't think I'll ever forget. The first book when you see it, and each time, actually, it's strange. Each time you see your book, the first look of it, it's very special. And you're going to launch it now in different parts. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, the book has been launched on the internet. Earlier, we did an Instagram
Yeah,
program,
yeah.
but I'll be launching it in Delhi now at the New Delhi Book Fair on 18th. And then
18th of January, 26.
18th of January, yeah. And I'll follow that up with in this season of book fairs to try and see whether I can, garner more interest. But so far, the reviews have been good. And Abhijit, thank you for your comments on the book. It's
No, I
it's
really enjoyed it. I loved it. So, I always say that I'll review and talk about a book which I have loved, because there's no point talking about a book you didn't love, because, when you say, I didn't like the book, I didn't do that, and write about that, it's sort of, a book takes a lot of effort. So, if I can't do anything to bring a good book to my readers, at least I don't want to sort of ruin it for somebody else, who's put in all the effort. So,
no,
yes, I
thank you very
definitely
much.
enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I liked it because also somewhere, you've had a very fascinating career story. When I look at it, so you've done so many things in very interesting scenarios, whether it was in the media, whether it was in pharma, whether it was in various places. What has been the biggest problem that, always challenged you when you look at your career? What's been the biggest
Yeah.
challenge that you
So,
see continues to happen
yeah.
regardless of where you are?
Yeah, I think in my case, um, it was strange because the initial 12 years were kind of staid and bureaucratic when I was in State Bank, and then came out to American Express Bank, which was like being thrown at the deep end because you're now faced with punishing targets and short timelines, and you're, under the scrutiny of an American system. And that was a kind of a change that I saw, but it also gave me an opportunity to actually, stretch myself to the limit and see what further I could do. And so that's how the dialogue with the Times of India group came up, and they were looking
Mm,
for diversification. And I said, okay, I can help you diversify because, that kind of entrepreneurial bug came in. And so the biggest challenge has always been that, and I blame myself a little bit in that because I've always taken, um, after the initial period when the entrepreneurial bug bit me, I've taken challenges which were, when I look back now and I see that, okay, what was I thinking at that point of time? So it was more or less from ground up. Start with, making the strategy, hiring people, and getting business off the ground, and then taking it to some kind of valuation and public listing, which is what the the shareholders were really looking at. So that whole journey was interesting, exciting, but also very stressful. So the biggest challenge always was that everything was a challenge at that point of time, getting the right people, which you know very well. And, as you wrote in your last newsletter, that 46% of hires don't really work. And I've actually been faced it because, first of all, you were selling a concept to people, saying that, okay, this is what we're going to do. It's not that this is a running company and this is what we do. This is what we are going to do. Fair enough, people were coming out of institutions and we had to hire people from, sometimes from foreign banks and all of that, coming out of secured jobs. So that was actually, if you look at it, people were the biggest challenge that I had. Money was not that much of a problem because money, could be gathered if you had the right concept. There were people who were willing to invest. But getting the right people and then, making that into a cohesive team was my biggest challenge.
and what makes it hard? Is it tougher to sell a concept to, somebody who is stepping into the workforce for the first time? Is that harder than, let's say, somebody giving up their secure role and then coming into a startup? Which is tougher?
I think, the latter is tougher because when you're starting out on a new venture, you're really looking for people who can hit the ground running. And so you're looking for people who can actually deliver and who've had the experience and who are good. I mean, you don't want people who really want to come out of institutions, kind of rejects. So then you're trying to you appeal to their, sense of fulfillment in their career path, that you sell that whole strategy to them, and it's difficult. And as you establish the organization and you get it going, and there's some buzz about it, then it's not difficult to hire, you know, freshers, so to say, because then they know what they're getting into. So we
Mm,
hired
mm.
from various institutions, various management institutions. That wasn't so difficult. It was the first few hires, which I know at that point of time, I had to hire people from the French bank and Grinley's bank, and uh, they were coming out of secure jobs. And then you sell a concept. It's
And
tough.
I think it's far tougher to, sell a dream to somebody who's secure than to somebody who's really ready to take risks. And younger people are obviously far more comfortable with risk than somebody who's going to give up. And that also is part of what behavioral science research tells you, that our loss aversion is far stronger than the ability to handle gains. So if I tell you you will lose 1,000 rupees versus you will
Mm.
gain 1,000 rupees, it's always the loss of 1,000 rupees actually hurts you a lot more than the joy of gaining 1,000. So I think
Absolutely.
that's so it's very true. Um, I also found that this is also somewhere getting reflected in your story, The Eternal Scale, in your book. People continuously misjudge each other. That seemed to be another kind of a recurring theme that I saw. Was that my imagination, or is that how you crafted the characters? Because they all seem to make very significant errors of judgment.
Yes, absolutely. And the bottom line of all of this is that we're all human. There are positives and negatives, and we are not always perfect and correct.
Mhm.
So in this story, as a relationship develops between Payal and the protagonist, Payal, the protagonist, and Ali, uh, they jump headlong into a deep relationship, and there's a child. But circumstances force them to give up the child for adoption because they are in living in the slums of Kolkata at that point of time. They can't really nurture a child, a newborn, in those unhygienic situations. So that plays a very important, you know, creates a huge scar in the mother, and that emptiness remains throughout her life. While the child was adopted by a Jewish couple in the USA uh, is brought up pretty well, and she also has a penchant for music. And so, one of the ideas in the story is that uh, music, or the ability to delve in music, really passes through genes. We
Mhm.
see it all the time in what we call gharanas and all of that in India, that you have the patriarch and then you have disciples, including the sons and daughters. And
Mhm.
so that's how, I visualize this. And it's also music that provides the impetus to come back from the depths of despair
Mhm.
onto the world stage for the protagonist. And she finds music as a great way to really recover her mental condition and strength, and also gives her a huge amount of uh, determination to find meaning in her life. But as you said, that there is misreading, because then the relationship between Ali and Payal frays, because
Yes.
she blames him for this tragedy that had to unfold in giving up the child for adoption. And uh, similarly, the daughter who's growing up in the USA also encounters an abandonment situation. So,
And I don't want you
misleading.
to
Yeah,
give away the whole plot line, but I am also going to
sure.
therefore it's because I want the readers to read the book because I really enjoyed the way that you've articulated this. So it was one is the of course the plot line and the beautiful way in which you weave it through different locations. Um, I had a question which I've always been intrigued by, and which is that um, of course, when you are familiar with a setting, for example, you've lived in Balotra, so it's easy for you to write about Balotra. But if I were to write about Balotra, now today, of course, thanks to the internet, a lot of things have become easier. You can read up about that and you can understand, you can see YouTube videos of people who can sort of do that. Because in one of the stories, the challenge I wanted to take up was can I base a story in a town or country which I've never seen visited at all, you know. How would you go about crafting that? What would be, in the pre-internet era, you had to rely on people who will tell you the stories. Today, of course, it's a different model. What is your model of learning about a particular place? You know, how do you do that? What do you look for when you read or research that?
Yeah, I think if it's dated, then internet serves you only to that extent. You get just maybe still photographs of that time, but you really don't feel the fervor, the energy that's out there. So people are the best way to understand a place. For example, in this book, although Bangladesh features, and originally we are from Bangladesh, but from childhood I heard stories about Bangladesh and you know the land that they left behind, my family, and so it wasn't so difficult to craft that into the story. Uh, and besides, when I came back from the USA and kind of settled here in Kolkata, it's about 2 years ago. Uh, the the intrigue about Bangladesh seemed to be around the corner. This country is not far away from where I live. And so I used to get a lot, I managed to get a lot more inputs from people about, and we are talking about 1976 when they go to Bangladesh. So it's pretty dated at this point of time. So that's how, I got. But the rest of it is pretty firsthand. For example, when I was in the Middle East, I used to travel to Europe very often, practically twice a month. And in Germany and England, I met a lot of people who were connected with the World War. And so I used to love hearing their stories or their parents' stories. And some of that is into the book as well. Uh, of and one of the themes in this book is societal persecution across the world, in every
Yeah,
civilization.
yeah.
Europe is infamous for, what happened to the Jews during World War II. Um, and that also was a theme in this particular book, which,
Because
um,
you've woven in a lot of historical events. I mean, whether it's the assassination of Mujibur Rahman, whether it is, the liberation of Bangladesh, or whether it is, you reference the Second World War also beautifully in this. You've talked about, life in different cities. You've also had a little glimpse of Princeton, out
yeah,
there, which is where I first met you,
yes.
where we became friends. So I think that's another interesting way in which you've crafted the setting. It's almost that the location and the story, they are sort of moved by the location. If I were to sort of really deconstruct the methodology, it's almost like that. Was that a
Yeah, one of the
conscious
principles
choice,
that
or
yeah.
that just happened?
No, one of the principles that I followed is that all the characters are really products of a background, a history that they've gone through. For example, uh, the the adoptive parents of the girl were products of counterculture in the USA at that point of time, um, which gave them a very liberal outlook. So here was a girl who was actually historically of a Muslim father, a Hindu mother, and adopted by Jews, were very liberally minded. So I had to bring in the background of how
Mm.
people were actually shaped in their lives, how they came to believe and think in a particular way. It cannot be different from, or cut off from the way what they experienced in life.
Yeah, yeah.
So the victim of World War II, um, and the person that he who became the adoptive mother, they were both victims of World War II, but in different ways. One was a Jew, the other was a German. Um, but they came together because of their distaste for war to start with, which was the seed of counterculture because Vietnam was
Hmm.
raging at that point in time. So some of these elements came in as part of the story to shape their characters.
Sure,
And
sure.
then, of course, Princeton, you and I lived there, so it was more firsthand. Uh, the dormitory of Princeton
Yes,
University
yes. Yeah.
and all those places, and some of the bars that we might have gone to, like Triumph Brewery, which features in
Yes, of
this.
course. Yeah, I know. I know. You
So
should be
yeah,
charging royalty for those people that you are now advertising those places.
yeah, they
You
could.
should. What are you writing now? Is there another book which is coming in?
Yes.
Because
My second book is done and ready.
what is that
It's
about?
so that's about and I was actually trying to articulate that particular. It's a little more of a thriller, but it examines uh, the avarice and greed in the corporate world, um, especially in India, that tries to use regulations to their advantage, flout regulations for profits. And it's also about a family conflict in this, conflict of principles, where and within brothers that happens that you have,
Okay.
you know, one brother who's shooting for the easy way out, and there is another, the older brother, trying to keep to certain principles. But all my characters are not, I mean, at least even the ones who are kind of virtuous are not perfect. They have their flaws as well. So this is into the pharmaceutical industry, to give you a little lead on that. But that book is
Perfect. I
over.
can't wait to read it.
Thank you. That book is over. Uh, that is actually, we are co-authoring it, Indrani and I, because she's from, you know, the pharmaceutical industry and clinical. So she's helping me with that. And the third book that I've intuited about 15,000 words or so done so far is, the scourge of this distrust between two communities, a partition, the scars that it created. That's a bit of a personal story from my point of view, because my maternal grandparents did not come across the border from Bangladesh, and they kind of disappeared into thin air one day. So
So,
that is my.
I want to actually take you back to this whole aspect of your writing process. Would you say that now your writing, your identity is that of a writer or that of a corporate person who's turned writer or uh, something else? What is
No,
the
I think
identity that Manab Sen holds today in your mind?
today I just identify myself with writing. I find that very cathartic when you use words to shape a situation, describe a situation, and explore various aspects. For example, in this book, there are many allusions to societal prejudices. So when you explore all that, and then you try to convey it to a reader, that's a very cathartic process for me. I try to get up in the morning and do that.
Yeah,
But
it is.
my books also require a fair amount of research. Uh, I don't want to create a story without it being rooted somewhat in
So
reality.
fact check the entire
There is,
thing and all of that.
yeah, that
But was
there
your
is an
research
environment
more
which is
also on?
created.
I'm so sorry, I interrupted. Please go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, no, I wanted to ask you
Uh,
whether in the eternal scale there is so much of music which is also put in there.
yes,
Uh, is
yes.
that something you always knew about, the ragas and all of that, or is that something you also researched and
Well, both. I was very interested in music and ragas and all of that, but the latter part where Western music comes in and there is an exploration into rebellious music, so to say,
Mm, mm,
music of the rebel. There I had to do a fair amount of research because I was working on this concept of, you know, uh, the rebellious musicians who interested the daughter actually, composers like Claude Debussy and
mm.
Stravinsky and all of that, who actually came away from the Wagner style of music and then created a genre of their own. So there I had to do a lot of research into how
What
that played
what
out.
is what is easier to is it easy to research a field which you know a little bit about and go into a different genre? Like, so you said that you were already interested in Indian classical music, and therefore
Yes,
was the transition from Indian classical to Western classical or rebellious music, as you said, Debussy or Stravinsky, all
Claude
of that.
Debussy,
So
Stravinsky, yes.
was that tough, or was it easy because you kind of use one to explore the other?
Well, I think they're quite exclusive because one of the themes in the book is that there's a lot of cross-fertilization of Western classical music with many other kinds of music. For example, China. China adopted a lot of Western classical music and created fantastic music. For example, The Crouching Tiger, the movie, and The Hidden
Yes.
Dragon, won the Academy Award for Best Music. So did the Koreas, but there has not been much cross fertilization between Western classical music and Indian classical music, except for instances of Ravi Shankar and Yodi Menuhin and all that. But as alluded in the book, that this movement kind of stopped at the Himalayas and did not actually step over that. Uh, so, uh, so then they were quite exclusive, but the rebellious angle came in because of the background from which the daughter was brought up. Because uh, there was this seed of counterculture in that family. Let's look
Mm,
differently uh, at things. Let's not accept what is there. So that kind of, was their seed. It's kind of built up her personality in that way. So she looked for music which was rebellious. But that I had to research, yes.
of course. But, as we are coming to the close of this conversation, I just want to wish
Yeah.
you the very best for the book launch, and show us the cover one more time. And, The Eternal Scale by Manab Sen. And the
Eternal
story
Scale.
was quite fascinating. I really enjoyed the way that you've done the cover. That's a great cover design, by the way. But, it gives you a little bit of a hint of the story, but also really I enjoyed the writing so much, and I would of course do a review on it, in my blog, and you will see that some of this will also show up. So all the best for your new identity as a writer. And we hope that you will bring in all the backroom stories, behind the stage intrigue that goes on to all these places where you worked. And with that, thank you so much once again for being here.
Abhijit, it's such a pleasure. And you're such a great writer yourself. So you've been an inspiration to me. Thank you so much.
That's very generous. Thank you so much. All the best for your writing life. Bye bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.